So Stanislav, I have a question. There's an old saying that the cobbler's kids have the worst shoes, which means the shoemaker often doesn't really think about shoes. He thinks about himself last and his family last when he's making shoes, right? So when you sign in to your sessions,
welcome to
do you use single sign-up?
IBMI.
No.
Well, hi, Kurt. Hi, Stan. We're here for a new episode of the You, Me, and IBMI podcast. Welcome to the show, Stan.
Welcome.
Hi, Kurt. Hi, Alex. Thank you for having me here.
It's our pleasure. So the format of the show, we're going to talk a little bit about your career, about the work that you do, and then we're going to get into single sign-ons. One of our other podcast listeners actually requested that we take on that subject in a little bit more detail. So we are going to get to that. But first, Stanislav, let's hear a little bit about yourself. Where are you currently working from?
Well, I work from Bulgaria. I'm from Bulgaria, and I work from Sofia, Bulgaria. Actually, our team has been created 11 years ago, and I joined the team 10 years ago.
Oh, really?
And since the beginning, I have been working in IBM for 10 years, and since the beginning, I am part of the EBIZ team. So probably because I know that you already had some conversation with another team member that we support many different products. And for the EBIZ team, it is me and Gabriel. Yeah.
Okay, and so 10 years on EBIZ. So you've been supporting things like DCM, Secure Sockets Layer, and Kerberos SSO for a while now, right?
Yeah, 10 years. It sounds a lot of time, but we support many different products, as the products you said, but others like HTTP, Apache, WebSphere, integrated application servers, Java, SSL, SMTP, single sign-on, LDAP, many different products. So 10 years are maybe not enough to know all of them in the best possible way. But yeah, 10 years are also enough time to have some experience, yes.
Yeah, 10 years is enough time to get really good at a lot of things.
Yeah, at some things at least. Something which is, of course, if it's something it's interesting for you, like for example, I really enjoy working on SSL cases, so I think that I have better skills in this area because this is something which I am personally interested in, but also the other topics. So it depends, of course, which topic is most popular when we received cases. Our customers are using also WebSphere a lot. Our customers are using single sign-on a lot. So SMTP is something which the customers are using a lot on the IBMI also. SSL is something really big. So yeah, we have, these are the popular topics.
Yeah. So if a call comes into the queue, and it could be any call, what would be a call that what's a kind of call that you like to get and like to work on, and why?
I will prefer something like SSL because I feel confident in this area. Yeah.
No, you said it was an area that you kind of liked and were interested in. Why is that?
Because SSL is something like we can really trace in a clear way how the connection happens, and we can really obtain from the IBMI all settings, and we can have a really clear picture what is happening, and if the problem is on the IBMI or outside of the IBMI. So this is something like even when a third-party application is involved, we have really good ways to collect data and to understand what the problem is.
Yeah, I think that's true, that there's certain areas of support where they're always, in English we would say it's a gray area where you're kind of sure, but sometimes when we give a customer a solution, it really depends on what else or what other products they might be using. But it sounds like for this, it's obvious. In print, there are certain things that are obvious and the tracing is easy. Alex, I'm sure for data access, there's certain issues that you always know if it's this message and this is happening, this is exactly what the problem is.
Well, if the communications are not encrypted, then yes, it's very easy and clear. But when customers start using secure sockets layer, I can't make any sense of the traces anymore. So, Stan, I'm really glad that you have a lot of confidence in your ability to diagnose issues with secure sockets layer TLS communications. Because, man, when it's not uncommon for us to ask a customer, could you please recreate the issue but with encryption disabled so that we can gather a communications trace and I can see what's flowing between the client and the server. But yeah, hopefully that's not too common a situation for us. But it's very comforting to know that you and your team are available to help out with problems with SSL.
Yes, I think that SSL is a really popular topic. So everybody in our team are really good in this area. So if you, anyway, I think that everybody are really deep skilled in the SSL area. And I'm really thankful to all my colleagues from the United States who trained me 10 years ago and who were helping me to understand it. But now, really, if you have some problem with SSL, I think that our team is the best choice to have.
Yeah. I'm more often these days. If there's a problem with SSL, I can try to work on it a little bit. I know the basics of SSL, but if a customer needs their connection fixed quickly, I'm going to bring on someone from your team more quickly.
Yeah, because this can be critical for them, of course.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
All connections, especially for production systems, they are encrypted. So if it is not working, it can be really impactful. So yeah, normally when we have severity 1 cases for SSL, this is like something which we understand that they really need immediate assistance in this case.
Yep. Mm. And did you know anything about SSL before you started working with IBM?
No, not for SSL, nothing.
So what's your background? Yeah. How did you get a job at IBM supporting SSL connectivity and single sign-on and WebSphere and whatnot?
Well, my university degree is in the computer systems area, and I have also business administration, like a secondary education. But my main university degrees in the computer systems area, and before starting work at IBM, I have been working in HP, and in HP I was supporting ZOS actually, which is another big IBM technology. Yeah, and I was supporting ZOS for 5 years, but it was like we were supporting more like system batch jobs, like IPLs, like changes, like things like this. It was not like specific communications like SSL or things like this. And after that, when I started at IBM, I just joined the IBMI team, and IBMI was completely new OS for me because IBMI and ZOS, they are not similar, I think.
They're not similar.
But anyway, when I started here, I just all these topics were new for me.
And have you had any interesting cases lately, like in SSL or single sign-on that are remarkable?
Well, the interesting cases are at the same time the most difficult cases, and we always have at least one of them in the queue. And at the moment, I have one which I have related to Java application, and this is a third-party product, and it is failing with API failure, and this is happening without any error messages, which is making even more complex. But we are trying to understand more about it, and Yeah, we are not sure even if the problem is if Java is Java related or communication problem. So we have, our team and data access also, we support like not only IBMI products. Sometimes when customers are running third-party applications on the IBMI, it is again something which we are trying to help with. And these cases can be difficult for us. When we support like our products, like for example, admin server or our servers, this is something which we know all about. But if we support third-party product, this is like a gray area for us. Yes.
Yeah. It's always hard to decide where the problem is. Is it purely in Java, or is it in the customer's third-party application or the third-party application? Or where is it? That's always very difficult with those types of cases.
Say, Stan, so you said you started 10 years ago, and 10 years ago, the EBIZ queue was still in live call mode, meaning you sat live and the calls came in. Absolutely. Do you remember the first call you took?
Yeah, of course I remember it.
What was it?
Yeah, well, it was not good call at all. It was really scary for us because when we started it, we were like with very limited knowledge, and our colleagues told us, okay, you need to start working with the customers on the live calls, and if they have questions which you're not sure about, or if you have something which you need to ask, you can always ask us. So just start working with them, and you'll see that you know more than you expect.
Sure.
But my first case was not like that. It was like something like I didn't know a lot about. So I still remember it because the customer was asking me about specific job, and he was asking me what Java version this job should use. And the job he was talking about was not IBMI job. It was like a third-party application job.
Oh, okay.
And even if this customer calls me today and asks me this question, there is no way for us to tell them if it is about third-party product, which Java version is the best for it. But at this point, when he asked me, I was like, I need to check, because it was like, when you do not have enough experience, you're not really confident. But I still remember it. Yeah, I still remember the exact question.
Yeah. Well, when you're new, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And you don't know what you're not even supposed to know.
Absolutely.
Like sometimes we get questions and we think, I should know this. But then later you realize, this is not even supported. This is not something anybody in the queue knows. But when you're new, you think, gosh, I really need to get better at this job.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I had a customer, like the first week that I started taking live calls, they were asking about PC5250 device descriptions. And I was doing my best to bumble through it, but it wasn't working. And eventually the customer said, I wanted to get an explanation for how these device descriptions work, and I think I just explained it to you.
That sounds like something I've heard before, too. It's funny because we do learn a lot of things from customers because they are better at using the system than we are.
We have very experienced customers, yeah.
We do.
If you have someone who is supporting the system for 30 years and he's asking me questions, of course, I can be helpful in specific areas, but they know more about me than some other areas. So,
yeah.
So, some of them are very experienced.
Yeah. Well, Stanislav, so Alex had thought you would be a good person to talk to about single sign-on. And I have to admit that even though I've been in IBMI support for a pretty long time, I don't think I really understand, and I might edit this out later or change this later, but I don't know if I really understand what single sign-on is and when it's used. I kind of think single sign-on is like something that would help me not have to keep logging in to ACS each time. But is that what it is or not?
And Stanislav, before you answer, I would ask that you please reference Greek mythology as you do so.
Yes, correct.
You mean
Can
the
you do that?
Kerberos?
Yes.
You mean
Look. I mean, before we start talking about this, we should just clarify what we mean by single sign-on, because there's a million different terms for it, right? And it all basically means the same thing.
Yeah.
Let me try. I'll go single sign-on, which is single sign-on, and then there is network authentication, and then there is Kerberos, and I'm sure I'm missing some other terms that mean the same as those other three things.
Yeah, many customers yes. Sometimes customers are talking about Kerberos because this is the name of the protocol. Some customers are talking about single sign-on because this is the name of the method to. But some of them are talking about the network authentication, which is more about the IBMI configuration. Some of them are talking
so there
about
is a difference between those terms.
Yeah, some of them are asking, for example, how to use Active Directory to configure Active Directory on the IBMI, which again is a single sign-on question, but they're talking about the Active Directory part, which is the Windows server, which is creating this certificate. So they are using all these terms like some part of the configuration. Some of them are asking, we want to use EIM, which is the identity manager, which is again part of, so they're using different terms from the configuration, and but anyway, we after we receive call related to these topics, we know that they're talking about single sign-on, and it is surprising that I didn't expect that this is one of the biggest topics for us. Many customers are using single sign-on, and they're using it for years.
So Stanislav, what is single sign-on?
Single sign-on means on the IBMI means that you authenticate to the network a single time, and you have access to all systems and services which are participating in this setup without having to sign into each one independently. Most customers are using it to access the green screen sessions without entering IBMI credentials. They just need to sign in on the PC with user and password. And this authentication is completely enough for the user to access the IBMI session from the PC after that. They do not need to enter the IBMI user and password after that in order to access the system.
Okay.
And because many customers are using this for access to the green screen sessions, this can be critical for them.
Now, does that mean that they have to have, does this mean that they have to have the same user ID and password in Windows as they have on their IBMI?
No, it is not required. This is something which we do on the IBMI. Part of the IBMI configuration is to map the user on the PC to the user on the IBMI. And we can map any user. For example, we can map your user on your PC to QSEC officer on the IBMI if you want. It is not required to be on your user profile.
I didn't know that.
So, yeah, we can do this like... or we can map several PC users to use user on the IBMI. But most of the times, just the PC user and the user on the IBMI are for the same person, but they do not need to be exactly the same, like the same username. They can be different usernames.
Okay.
And Kurt, just to make sure you understand, like if I'm looking at a communications trace, assuming it's not encrypted, but if I'm looking at a communications trace of a client trying to establish a connection to a server, I'll typically see authentication credentials, a user ID and a password being sent. But when SSO is in use, there is no, well, there may still be a user ID, but there is no password being sent to authenticate. Instead of using credentials, it'll be an authentication ticket, right, Stan?
Yes, well, we still have authentication, but this is not happening with user and password. So the customer, they're just seeing the green screen immediately. They're not seeing the sign-in window. They just see directly the system menu after they open the green screen session. But behind this, we have ticket exchange. And if this ticket exchange for some reason is not happening, the sign-in will fail. The single sign-on will not work. So we still have authentication with ticket. This is the authentication way for single sign-on. We are talking about tickets. This is because actually this configuration is not only on the IBMI. And when we try to understand single sign-on which is not working, the first thing is we need to understand if the problem is on the IBMI or outside, because this is like including Active Directory Windows Server, which will create the authentication ticket. It will include also DNS servers, which are very important for the single sign-on to work. And
that's where the three heads come from, right? I mean, that Greek dog Cerberus or Kerberos or however he's called, he's got three heads for some reason, and that is partly why they decided to give the protocol that name, right?
To talk about how Kerberos looks like in the very basic way, like we have at least three parts in the configuration. One of them is the IBMI. The other one, which is very important, is the Windows Active Directory server, which is creating the tickets for the authentication. And the third part is the PC, which is the client. So the PC is asking the Active Directory for authentication, and after the PC receives the ticket, it will send this ticket to the IBMI and will try to sign in with this credentials. So like at least three parts are involved, and there is another very important part, which is the network and the DNS servers, which are responsible to resolve the system name, the IBMI system name correctly. Because if this is not happening, the entire configuration will fail. And very frequently we have DNS problems when customers are reporting single sign-on issues. At the end, this is just because they have DNS change and the IBMI is no longer resolved correctly. The IBMI name is now resolved incorrectly, or the IP is not correct. So many times the problem is outside of the IBMI, but we need to inform customers that where the problem is. And one of the things which we do is to request trace, and in the trace we can see exactly how the PC is requesting the ticket. After that, we can see how the Active Directory is giving this ticket to the PC. We can see the ticket inside. We can see the user, and after that, we can see how the ticket is sent to the IBMI. So the entire communication between these parts are in the trace, and we can see if the connection is failing outside of the IBMI, or if the problem is on the IBMI.
So Stanislav, let's say a customer calls in with a problem authenticating using Kerberos. If you could only ask them for one piece of diagnostic material, what would that be?
We have something which is called LDAP collector. And the LDAP collector is something which we use to diagnose almost the entire configuration on the IBMI. And also we have some network checks there, so it will be very useful for us if we have this data.
That is a different answer than I thought you were going to say, because in my experience, and granted I am not a single sign-on expert, but in my experience supporting client server, the first tool I generally reach for is a Wireshark trace taken on the client, because when you have that trace, you see both the communication between the client and the IBMI server, and you also see the communication between the client and the key distribution center on port 88. And a lot of times it looks like the KDC will send back an error message, like a return code that explains why the single sign-on authentication didn't work. But the LDAP collector, that is something that I should keep in mind for these kinds of problems, because it gathers a whole bunch of useful, detailed information. So yeah, it's something we should use more frequently.
I agree with you that the Wireshark trace will be very useful. Sometimes customers are not very happy to collect it because we're asking them to download Wireshark, to install this Wireshark on the PC, to start the trace. But yes, if they do this, if they provide us a trace, it will be very helpful.
If you don't have that trace, though, doesn't that mean you would have a much harder time telling what the problem is?
Most of the times I'm not requesting the trace immediately, because just if we have error message and dump from the ACS, because most of the times when you receive this error message for single sign-on, you have one in the dialog box, you have one button which says generate I think service logs or ACS logs or something like this. When they click on it, they will generate a dump which will contain a lot about the problem on the PC. And this will be very helpful. If they provide us this dump from the ACS, and if they provide us the LDAP collector, this is most of the times enough for us to know if this is IBMI or outside of the IBMI.
So Stanislav, I have a question. There's an old saying that the cobbler's kids have the worst shoes, which means the shoemaker often doesn't really think about shoes. He thinks about himself last and his family last when he's making shoes, right?
Yeah.
So when you sign in to your sessions, do you use single sign-on?
No, I'm not using single sign-on.
Why? Why don't you use it?
Well, because it will require Active Directory server in my environment, and I do not have. I have single sign-on configuration in specific environment which we use a specific server in Rochester, and in this remote desktop I'm using single sign-on, but on my PC it is not possible.
Oftentimes we will be working with a customer and we ask them to sign onto a system, and they bring up a session and, I got to sign on. And that's when I think about, man, this should be easier, because I don't have it set up easier. But are you telling me that for many customers, they might not really be able to set this up themselves? Is this not something somebody can easily configure themselves so that they can just sign on to systems in a less annoying way?
I think that the initial single sign-on configuration is not simple, because it depends on IBMI. It also will depend on someone from the Active Directory server to understand the Active Directory environment very well. Well, regarding if you're creating this configuration for the first time, it is not easy configuration.
If we're working with a customer and they say to us, I wish it was easier to sign on to this system, what should we tell them to do? What's the easiest way for them to get that set up?
We have very good document how to configure this. The document is really detailed. It is a long one, but at the same time it really explains everything in it. So they can use this document on the IBMI, and the configuration on the IBMI is not so difficult, because it is using the navigator and it is using some wizard, and you have, for example, 10 steps to configure the network authentication service, and after that you need to define every single user, but again it is you're doing this in the navigator, so it is not something very complex to do. But if you're doing for the first time, it can be hard for the system administrator to create it for the first time.
What are the things that a customer needs to know and be prepared to work with in order to set up single sign-on?
They really need a good understanding about the network environment, like the domain names, the Active Directory name. They need to know more about things which are outside of the IBMI, like the network settings and the Active Directory fully qualified domain name. everything else is something which they can find in the document. I have seen many customers to create this configuration without issues. And even at the end, we have something very good on the IBMI. At the end of the wizard, we are generating one file, which is called batch file. This file actually contains Windows script. So we're just telling them you can use this script file on your PC, on your Active Directory, and you can run it on your Active Directory, and it will create the users for you. It will create the configuration on the Active Directory for you, which is really helpful because they do not need Active Directory administrator to create it. Sometimes if they have zero knowledge for Active Directory, this batch file will do the job for them. But so this is something really helpful for the customers. But the problem here is that we are not Active Directory experts. So if they have questions like more specifically Active Directory related, we will not be able to help a lot with this.
Curious about that batch script that you run on the Active Directory server. If something needs an adjustment, like let's say you went through the wizard in Navigator and you created the batch script, but as you went through the wizard, you forgot to say, create the principles for IBMI Net Server. Now, do you have to create the batch script all over again? You have to go through the wizard all over again, or can a customer that's familiar with Active Directory, can they go in and add the Net Server principles manually after that, or should they just create the batch script again?
Well, if the customer does not have experienced administrator on the Active Directory, the best option will be to run the wizard again, because you have ways to manually add these principles on the IBMI without running the wizard again. There is a way to create this on the Active Directory manually, but it will require someone who is experienced in this area to do. If they just want to do it without interactions, they can rerun it from scratch. And we have really good documents like how to clear the entire configuration if they did not like it for some reason, how to clear everything, and how to start from scratch. So sometimes we're telling customers, if you have some concerns about your current configuration, you can completely remove it and just run it from scratch.
But it sounds like if someone wants to set up single sign-on, they really almost need to be some kind of administrator for Active Directory, or just pass the information to that person?
It is enough to pass the information to the Active Directory administrator. Okay. Most of the times customers are working with Active Directory administrator. And this is like an area where if the Active Directory administrator, they may have some requirements like the name of the users or things like this. So we are not telling them you need to use this batch file. You do not. If they have someone on the Active Directory who is experienced, they can just ignore the batch file and not using it at all.
Oh, okay.
But I just wanted to mention something which customers should know maybe about what can be broken on the IBMI and what is 100% required if they want the single sign-on to work on the IBMI. This is the LDAP server. This server contains very important information. It contains the users enabled to use single sign-on on the system. And if the server is down, it will not work at all. It is completely enough. If you want to break this single sign-on, you can just bring down this server and it will never work. So the first thing which they need to check if the server is running, and another thing which they need to check is the server contains the correct data. Because after restore operations, we have seen many times when some single sign-on users are missing, or some mappings between users are incomplete, like the data is corrupted, and this is really like something which is breaking the entire configuration on the IBMI. And most of the times we are talking about thousands of users. So even if we find this problem and a customer is not able to fix every single user manually in the navigator, but we have good option to fix it. If they have good save, they can just restore the LDAP directory, which contains all users, and it will start working again. We have seen this many times. This is happening normally after incorrect restore failure. And the fix is just to stop the LDAP server first, to restore this directory which contains all users, and to start the server again, and everything will work as before.
Quite the sledgehammer there, if you wanted to do maximum damage with the least amount of keystrokes.
Yeah, you can just end this server and you will see that no one will be able to use it anymore. Yeah. And unfortunately, sometimes we are seeing like really severity 1 cases for single sign-on because customers are using this configuration for many years and no one knows the user and the password. So all these users, they have no idea how to sign in on the IBMI. They are using single sign-on for many years. They do not know the user. They know nothing. Without single sign-on, they're not able to access the system. This is something which we have seen many times.
Yeah, that's interesting, Stan. I wonder if some customers are slow to implement single sign-on for that reason alone. You know, if it works, great, but if it doesn't work, suddenly your enterprise is in a whole lot of trouble.
Yeah, this can be a really situation like. Of course, it looks like single sign-on is just a way to bypass typing user and password, which is a really good way to work. But if you're using it for years, at some point you have no idea how to sign in without it.
What are the most commonly asked questions related to single sign-on that you see?
They're saying, I'm trying to sign in to my green screen and I'm seeing this error message, and they're just providing us the ACS error message, which is like network authentication, not and some error code.
Oh, sure.
And this is normally this is what we see in the cases. Normally the problem description contains the error message which customer is receiving when trying to sign in with single sign-on.
Okay, and usually those are DNS related.
Yeah, many of them are DNS related.
Okay, well, what other kind of questions do you get?
Another type of questions. Well, something very interesting about the DNS. If you see a customer who is saying that the single sign-on is really working very, very slow, and if they ask this, why my single sign-on is working so slowly today, this is again problem with DNS normally. So this is the first thing which we need to check. But what else? The DNS will impact the single sign-on performance sometimes. It will work, but it will work in a really slow way. So DNS can be is very, very important part of this.
Sure, that makes sense.
But if it is not DNS related, another type of problem outside of the IBMI will be Active Directory problem. For example, if they have duplicate users, or if they are missing users, or if they have problem with the password, because there is one password which we define on the IBMI, and we are defining the same password on the Active Directory. And this is very common problem, by the way. The password on the IBMI and the one on the Active Directory, they should match.
Sure.
If for some reason someone on the IBMI is changing the password for the service principal without changing the Active Directory password, this will immediately impact the single sign-on. At the same time, if someone on the Active Directory is doing some changes and resetting passwords, or the password is expired, or things like something which the IBMI administrator do not know about this because it's happening outside of the IBMI, but someone is changing the password for the service principal on the Active Directory, again, because this password is used to encrypt the ticket. At the moment when the ticket arrives on the IBMI is not able to decrypt the ticket because the password is not matching. These passwords, if they are not matching, this is a very common issue for us. We are seeing many of them. customers should know that resetting the passwords, it is always required. If they have some policy to change the password, they need to change both on the IBMI and to the Active Directory to match like the initial configuration.
So if the customer has a policy that they're changing their IBMI passwords, they need to have some kind of reminder in place that they also go and change their passwords on their Active Directory server.
Yeah, this is absolutely required. And for every server principal, you're defining password.
This is new information for me that service principals also have their own passwords defined. That's interesting.
When we create the initial configuration, we are defining password for every server principal. When you create a single sign-on configuration, I will provide you the configuration document as a link. We have at least two basic parts. We're configuring the network authentication service, which is one wizard, and we're configuring the identity mapping, which is a different one. So the network authentication service is the first one which we configure, and when we configure it, we're defining here which service principals which services on the IBMI will use single sign-on. And when you define them, you're defining password for every one of them. And when you, at the end of this wizard, you will have this batch file, and it will contain the passwords in really clear format. You can open the file and you'll see them. And when you run the batch file on the Active Directory, the users will be created with the same password. So, yes, and this initial configuration will work until someone changes the password for the service principal on the IBMI or on the Active Directory. So if someone is doing these password changes for these principals, they just need to do this both on the IBMI and on the Active Directory server.
Dan, thanks a lot for joining us on the show today. It was a pleasure getting to know you a little better, and I certainly learned a lot about single sign-on, and I think a lot of our listeners will appreciate your detailed explanation of how a single sign-on works and what parts go into it. So thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me and for having me. Thanks a lot.
Well, yeah, Stan, thanks so much for joining us. And of course, I don't know much Bulgarian, but Tova Beshe Zabavno.
Oh my God, yeah. Thank you very much for... Actually, you sound like Bulgarian. Thanks a lot.
And of course, thanks again to our customers for joining us on T.
As IBMI.